You're all welcome to this introduction to the peoples of the Baltic. First, a word on terminology. Baltic refers to the area surrounding the Baltic Sea, which we call the Baltic region. Technically, we start out from the so-called drainage area, that is the area in which all water flows towards the Baltic Sea. This drainage area makes up our common environment. However, it is also a region which has a common history and culture. It is quite natural since once water was by far the most important way of communication for both friendly and unfriendly voyages. Today, we hope cooperation and friendship will characterize our connections, since we all depend on each other. Therefore, we also need to learn more about one another. That is why we have put together this introductory program. The Baltic region is very heterogeneous. In fact, one of the most heterogeneous regions in Europe. At least some 15 languages are spoken here, a great number of minorities are found, several religions and different political and economic traditions have evolved here. East meets west and north meets south. 14 countries in whole or in part make up the region. What follows are introductory presentations from 10 of these countries, as well as 2 presentations from peoples without countries of their own. These presentations have been made by and with your fellow students. We will begin with the 2 Finno-Ugric countries, Finland and Estonia, on the northeastern part of the region. Other Finno-Ugric peoples in the area includes the Karelians, the Veps and the Ingrians. In both Finland and Estonia there are important minority groups of other origins. In Finland, the Swedish minority, and in Estonia, the Russian minority, although the situation for these minorities are quite different. The Finns and Estonians are close enough to be able to understand each other's languages, and recently their contacts have increased dramatically. We will begin with Finland.
My name is Karina, and I'm going to be one of your guides on this tour in Finland.
And I am Jörn. Welcome to follow us for the next 12 minutes.
I'm delighted to start this presentation here in Turku. It is where I live, where I study, and where I work. Turku is the oldest city of Finland, and it also used to be the former capital. And then, of course, the first university, Åbo Academy, was founded here.
Turku is the oldest city in Finland?
Yes, and this part was the only that was left after the big fire in
1827.
Was it that? Okay.
1827.
And then there's still those wonderful small shops where you can buy candies and...
Probably the oldest shops in Turku.
It must be. And then there are, for example, shoemakers and...
a post office.
A post office and a bakery, and then I think there even was a coffee shop a little bit further on.
Our social welfare and educational system is built in a way that gives almost everyone a fair chance to start and live a good life. Even though the recession today has caused lots of unemployed people.
People in Finland like to live in houses or apartments of their own. This area, built in the 50s, is a very common sight in almost every society in the country. Those who have more money can afford to live nearby the sea.
The archipelago in the southwest of Finland is unique in the world. The area between Finland and Sweden consists of more than 8,000 smaller and bigger islands. A paradise for everyone, and an area that thousands and thousands of tourists visit every summer. Besides tourism, fishing, fish farming, and agriculture are the most important activities for the population in this area.
Another place to find peace and beauty is, for example, here in Mustio. This was one of the villages where the industrialization took place. Today, this village is a place for recreation and memories. It was in a society like this where people for the first time got used to eating potatoes.
When people in Finland for the first time got used to potatoes, it was seen as a very exclusive product, something only for rich people. Today, potatoes are one of the most important products on the Finnish dining table.
When you arrive in Helsinki, today's capital of Finland, you'll probably start your visit here. From this spot, it's easy to reach every interesting place in Helsinki. I prefer to use the tram car. It's easy, it's fast, and you don't have to look for a parking place.
The political stage is situated here in Helsinki, where we have our president, our government and parliament. It is here in this building Finland was declared as the Independent Republic of Finland in 1917. Before that, Finland was a part of Sweden until 1809, and after that a part of Russia until 1970.
When you walk along the streets, in the parks, or down by the sea, I'm sure you'll notice that Helsinki is a very international city. Today, there are 142 nationalities living here. Here are also lots of beautiful buildings and churches. For example, the Uspensky Cathedral. It is one of the main buildings for the Orthodox population. The main religion in Finland is Lutheranism. In Helsinki, you will also find the biggest university in Finland, with more than 20,000 students. One of my absolute favorite places in Helsinki is this fortress Suomenlinna. I try to visit it at least once every summer.
What do you do then?
I go to summer theaters, picnic, and just walk around.
I suppose it has had many different missions during the last 200-300 years.
Yes, it was a fortress in the beginning, of course.
And a jail.
Yes, it has been a jail after the Civil War in 1918. It was used as a working camp.
And nowadays it is a place for recreation and picnics and so on, theaters.
That's right, and then people are also living there.
In Helsinki, as in many communities along the coast, you will notice that Finland has two official languages, Finnish and Swedish. Even though the Swedish-speaking Finns are just about 6% of the population, you can, for example, have social and healthcare in Swedish. We also have a possibility to get an education and to speak in courts in our own language.
In Finland we got thousands of lakes.
And this is one of them. Savonlinna Opera Festival. Ludwig van Beethoven, Fidelio. Every summer in Savonlinna there is an international opera festival. And for example this year there was Giuseppe Verdi Macbeth. The Finnish people is and has always been very close to nature. It's quite understandable since we're only 5 million people in a very big country. The population density is 14 persons per square kilometer. That means that the Finnish gold, our forests, take up quite a lot, or a very big actually, part of our country. For example, this view is very common in Finland.
Then of course you had the Finnish sauna. It's a tradition and definitely something more than just washing yourself. It's almost a ritual. It's a way to rest, to calm down. In my opinion, a sauna should be like this, heated by wood. It is well known that paper industry is the biggest branch of industry in Finland. Forestry, paper industry and agriculture has changed our environment a lot. The environmental situation in Finland could in general be described as quite good. Although we have problems too, like air and water pollution. In my opinion, the biggest environmental problem is the bad situation of the Baltic Sea. In every city and town you can find at least one bigger newspaper and several smaller ones.
That means that we are well informed about what's going on in our society, and that is really an important part of our democracy.
As equality is.
Yes, there have actually been a lot of discussions during the last years about the equality between women and men.
And this started actually in 1906 when Finland, as the second country in the world, gave women the right to vote in elections.
This is the barn swallow, one of the symbols of our nation, the national bird of Estonia. Our country, Estonia, is situated on the eastern coast of the Baltic Sea. With its area, slightly more than 45,000 square kilometers, it is the second smallest country in the region. About 1.5 million people live here, about 71% of them live in towns. The density of population is about 35 persons per square kilometer. This is Tallinn, the capital city of Estonia. Estonia is a republic. Its birthday is on the 24th of February. On that day, in 1918, our independence was proclaimed. During next 2 years, the country was occupied by the German and Russian troops, but the republic survived. The peace treaty between Estonia and Russia, signed in Tartu on the 2nd of February 1920, was the first foreign recognition for both countries. The independence was to last only for 20 years. On June 16, 1940, as the result of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact signed the year before, the Soviet troops entered the country, demanding the change of the government. Later, a kind of elections were held, and finally, in August 1940, Estonia formally joined the USSR. In late 80s, a new wave of national awakening began. Estonia started to move away from the USSR. Finally, on the 20th of August 1991, Estonia again became an independent state. The new constitution came into force in July 1992, and according to this, the first free elections were held in the autumn. These brought up a new generation of politicians.
Now let's make a break with the policy and get acquainted with the nature of the country. The low population density, 35 inhabitants per square kilometer, means that a lot of place is left for the nature. About 40% of the whole territory is covered by forests, while fields take only some 20%. By the way, almost the same area is occupied by bogs. Northern Estonia is a plain limestone plateau with a cliff on the seashore. The cliff reaches the height of 56 meters at its highest points. Western Estonia is rich in bogs. It's a low and plain area, former seabed. Southern Estonia is quite mountainous compared with the other parts of the country. The age formations of the glaciations make the landscape mosaic and hillocky. The area has lots of hills, small lakes and small bogs. The highest point of the three Baltic states, the Munamägi hill, reaches 318 meters from the sea level. Estonia has about 1,200 lakes, which cover 4% of the total area. The biggest among them is Lake Peipsi. Situated on the eastern border of Estonia, it is the fifth biggest lake in Europe, with its 3,550 square kilometers. Due to its small territory, Estonia has no big rivers. The Narva River carries the water of Lake Peipsi to the sea. The Emajõgi River, connecting Lakes Võrtsjärv and Peipsi, has found its place also in the folklore. A very peculiar feature is the Baltic Sea, forming picturesque bays, fine sand beaches and numerous islands. Saaremaa and Hiiumaa are the biggest among them. The total number of islands is some 1,500, and due to land uprise, this number is increasing slowly. In many places, unique plant communities, the alvars, appear. The nature is protected in 1 national park and in 5 state nature reserves. The Lahemaa National Park, situated on the northern coast, was founded in 1971, being the first national park in the former USSR.
Estonia is poor in natural resources. Forest and peat in the bogs already mentioned. The two only mineral resources are oil shale and phosphorite. Oil shale in the northeast has concentrated a quite large industrial area with oil shale mining, chemistry and power stations. This industrial area causes a lot of environmental problems. Phenols in the mine water, spoiled lands, ash hills, alkaline dust coming from the chimneys of the power station, radioactive substances in Sillamäe are some of them. Another group of environmental problems are connected with the Soviet army. In spite of all political controversies, they are leaving. but the areas they used very often look like a desert. The pictures you see are made this summer in Paldiski, in a former naval harbor. Coming back to economy, we have to notice that the political and economical reforms going on have had a great influence on it. The main reason encouraging the coming of the market economy is our own money, Estonian krone. The changes in economy are so rapid that it's rather difficult to follow them. The general tendency is that the industries oriented on the eastern market are decreasing, while those who succeeded in exporting something to the West are enjoying good times. The changes reflect also in very active trading. For example, Estonia has become one of the greatest exporters of metals in Europe. Even in the street, you can buy all kinds of goods. The markets are fulfilled with foreign products, but at the same time our agriculture is in deep crisis. For long it has been a traditional way of life for our people. In 1949-1950 the small farms were joined into kolkhozes. Now the land is being given back to its former owner, but the newborn private farms are seldom able to take a quick start. So the right word to describe nowadays agriculture is kaos.
Who are the people who live here? The Estonians are probably one of the oldest nations in the Europe. It's proved that our ancestors lived here on this spot of land already 5,000 years ago. Now the share of Estonians in the whole population is about 65%. Our language belongs to the Finno-Ugric group. Estonians are mainly Lutherans by the religion. The last 50 years brought a big non-Estonian community here. Now they form some 35% of the whole population. This is a very heterogeneous group, composed of different peoples from the former Soviet Union. The common feature for them is the Russian language they use. They have gathered in Tallinn, where they make up almost half of the population, and in 3 towns in northeast Estonia, Narva, Sillamäe and Kohtla-Järve, where they form the majority and work mainly in the big enterprises. Speaking about different peoples, we can't miss the minorities, who have been living in our country for centuries. The big forests in northeast Estonia and the shores of Lake Peipsi were the places where Russian people escaped from the religious reformation on the 17th century. The villages on the lake shores are still Russian populated. 100 years ago, the Kuremäe nunnery was built here. The smaller western islands were inhabited by the Swedes, but most of them left to Sweden in 1944. Up to the Second World War, we had quite a numerous German community, mainly in towns. In 1939, Hitler called them home. And last but not least, an interesting ethnical group who lives in the southeastern corner of Estonia, the Setu people. It's often argued either the language they speak is a special one or only a dialect of Estonian. Their territory has been outside the borders of Estonia for a very long time. That's why their religion is Russian Orthodox and their culture differs from that of the rest of Estonia.
The economical crisis and reforms have badly influenced the social patterns. The numbers of marriages and births are decreasing. The number of abortions is much higher than the birth rate. The number of population is decreasing. We have less children and more old people, while the average length of life is also decreasing. In order not to finish in these black tones, we shall just turn to the culture. Nowadays, the traditional housing can be seen only in the museums, but traditional dances are still alive.
Estonia is often grouped together with Latvia and Lithuania when we speak of the three Baltic states. In many respects, they're alike. The importance of singing and folklore in their respective national identities is, for example, quite unique. Although important minority groups have always been present, the Russian minority has increased dramatically since the end of the Second World War, when these poor countries became a part of the Soviet Union, something which lasted until 1991. However, in a more precise sense of speaking a Baltic language, we only have two Baltic peoples, the Latvians and the Lithuanians. Even though the Latvians and the Lithuanians are neighbors and have a distant common origin, they're quite different. They do not understand each other's languages, they have different religious traditions, and their pre-20th century histories are quite different. We will now hear from both the Latvians and the Lithuanians, and we will begin with the Latvians.
Now is summertime and we are in the city Jūrmala, which is the biggest seaside resort city of Latvia. This is a favorite place not only for holidaymakers, but also for young people who are gonna be students soon. And this is an excellent place to get prepared for examinations, because the biggest high schools are situated just 10 kilometers from here in the capital of Latvia, Riga. However, about studies we will talk later. You may be interested to know a little bit more about our country, so let's have a look from a distance. The Republic of Latvia lies on the eastern coast of the Baltic Sea. Since ancient times, with its coastline exceeding 500 kilometers and easily accessible ports, Latvia has been a significant link between the states surrounding the Baltic Sea and Russia. The territory of Latvia corresponds to those of Lithuania and Ireland. The population of Latvia is 2.5 million people, scarcely populated, but 1/3 live in Riga, causing a number of ecological problems and social ones. The situation emerges as being more difficult due to the fact that almost all fossil fuels and resources for industry have to be imported. From ecological viewpoint, the problems like energy production, the conversion and utilization of toxic waste, the storage of radioactive matter, and the ecological problems created by the Soviet Army are still unsolved. Historically, Latvia was united by three ethnographical regions, which are very easily to distinguish. Imagine Riga being in the middle of a clock. Clockwise to the west is Kurzeme, north, Vidzeme, and east Latgale. In each of them, people speak in a bit different dialects, but together Latvian language itself is one of the two living Baltic languages, the other one being Lithuanian. You see our national monument, which is a unification symbol of all three ethnographical regions, and as a main clock axis standing right in the center of Riga. The figure Mother Latvia keeps up 3 stars symbolizing those 3 regions, and that is a present also in the coat of arms of the Republic of Latvia. July of this year, when we are making the video documentary, has become the important history when the legal constitution of Latvia as independent state was re-established. After more than 50 years' time, and again we have our own president. The way to independence has been quite a long time period, and many changes took place, especially in the population structure. Today, native nation makes just a half of all population in Latvia, and contemporarily Latvian language finds itself in a quite complicated situation, as almost one half of people are Russian-speaking. Meanwhile, one of the main cornerstones of Latvia's economy has been bridging a gap between East and West, which is of high importance to our country's economy now. Right now, it is very important to keep in reasonable balance nation's survival trends, role of European bridge, and rights to independence. Hello again. My name is Valdis. We are back in Riga. This is a time of exams, and I'm trying to enter Faculty of History at the University of Latvia. There I met some friends and discovered that we come from different parts of Latvia. For instance, I come from Latgale, which is eastern part of Latvia, known as Blue Lake District. There are about 3,000 lakes in Latvia, and more than half of them are in my native land. Latgale is well known for its diversity of religions. We have very strong Roman Catholic traditions. This autumn we are expecting Pope of Rome's visit to our famous cathedral in Aglona. Latgale has also the strongest Russian Orthodox traditions, and only in Latgale there is parish of all believers. And certainly we have also Lutherans and other religions. Such a diversity of religions and traditions has inspired me to study history. I want to know more about where we come from and understand better the land which has always been a melting pot of diverse cultures and crossroad of different nationalities. Still, there is much to learn and discover.
Hi, I'm Zane. My native land is Vidzeme, and I'm really proud that the highest peak in Latvia is located here. Although it's only more than 300 meters high, we call Vidzeme a mountain land. Latvians have rich traditions, and one of the most famous ones is the celebration of Midsummer. It's the shortest night of the year, and we call it Ligo Festival. Since old times, mountains, or better say, hilltops, have been the best places where to make fire. The Ligo fire gives fertility to farming land, as far as the light from burning tar barrel on the pole reaches it. So it becomes really clear why it's so important to make fire at the highest point possible. But the most important belief about the Ligo night, and I really keep to it, says, "Who sleeps at the Ligo night will sleep the whole summer." My native land Vidzeme has also one of the biggest woodlands in Latvia, and it's the only place of survival for rare species. A few days ago I saw a black stork, something you do not see often at all. That is why I want to study biology. There's so much to see and investigate in my country.
Hi, I'm Carlos. I'm coming from Kurzeme. better known as Courland. This part of Latvia has the longest sea border. Therefore, Kurzem is very famous with old seaman traditions. Tobago and Trinidad in South America are old colonies of Courland. You still can find Latvian names for the street there. Moreover, history tells about severe fights between ancient Courlanders and Vikings for division of the areas of influence. At the top of Courland, a small Latvian minority of almost 100 people live. They belong to Finno-Ugrish branch, having their own Latvian language till nowadays. The biggest forests and the oldest nature reserve is also here. Nowadays, Kurzem is at the front of new changes. For instance, organic farming. I'm captured by the idea of ecologically clean technologies in farming and want to be back from my studies and get a lot into practice. I trust that it is one of the ways for Latvia to get into European market. And that's why I am not going to be a seaman.
Isn't it exciting that right this year and this month, all the regions of Latvia come together again for the biggest tradition alive, the Latvian Song and Dance Festival in Riga. This is an event where you will meet all of us, either as participants or observers. And no wonder, through all the times and changes, a song has been the source of strongest inspiration and fulfillment, even stronger than words.
Hello, I'm Erikas Antonavičius. I want to share with you some facts and stories about the history of my country and its people. Lithuania lies on the eastern coast of the Baltic Sea. It has a population of 3.7 million, of which 80% are Lithuanians. Lithuania is a country of fields and meadows, lakes and rivers, rolling hills and wood. Forests cover 27% of its territory. The capital city of Lithuania is Vilnius, first mentioned in written sources in 1323. Lithuanian cities abound with parks. As a matter of fact, Vilnius is one of the greenest capital of Europe. Vilnius is a city of fascinating history and unique architecture. Its buildings, particularly churches, are a mixture of several architectural styles. The old town of Vilnius is one of the largest of the kind in Europe. Incidentally, the geographic center of Europe is only 25 kilometers away from Lithuania's capital. For centuries, Lithuania has been an agricultural nation. Rural population accounts for 30% of Lithuania's inhabitants. At present, Lithuania is implementing an agrarian reform which aims to privatize the state farms of the Soviet era. In its current state, the nation's agriculture is geared to the needs of East European and Russian markets. A part of Soviet economic zone for 50 years, Lithuania played a significant role in the development of various technologies and computerized information systems. As the country now switches to a free market system, its most important assets are its people, their knowledge and expertise. Lithuania's environment has inherited a number of serious problems, such as river pollution adds to the deteriorating condition of the Baltic Sea. Several cities, including Kaunas and Šiauliai, have no water treatment facilities. Land reclamation of the Soviet era disrupted the structure of Lithuanian soil. Rural wells are contaminated due to the faulty use of fertilizers. The Ignalina nuclear power plant is a particularly grave hazard of Lithuania's environment. The Lithuanian ancestors, the Baltic tribes, settled the territory some 2,300 years BC. Lithuanian speaks an Indo-European language, one of the most archaic languages of the family. It is also among the oldest in the world, which makes it a valuable instrument for the studies of Indo-European culture and history. A key source for the studies of ancient Lithuanian beliefs and mythology is a folklore of Lithuania's ethnic regions, Žemaitija, Aukštaitija, Dzūkija and Suvalkija, as well as ancient rituals and rites, traditional art forms and symbols. Inhabitants of the four ethnic regions speak distinct dialects of the Lithuanian language and observe different ritual traditions and customs. Their characters and lifestyles also vary. Lithuania is a Catholic country, the last in Europe to have adopted Christianity over 600 years ago. However, element of pagan rituals such a cult of fire and offering to the goddess Gabia survived into 19th century. The Catholic faith survived and prevailed over the 50 years of forced atheism of the Soviet period. Alongside with Catholicism, Lithuania is also home of practicing Russian Orthodox, Old Ritual, Evangelical, Lutheran, and other believers. The state ensures equal support to and tolerance of all existing confessions. The state of Lithuania emerged in the Middle Ages. Its name was first mentioned in 1009th year. Following 2 centuries of the onslaught by European knight orders, the united forces of Lithuania and Poland defeated the Teutonic Order in the Battle of Grunwald in 1310. The 15th century, Lithuania was one of the most powerful states in Europe, with its borders stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. Late in the 18th century, Lithuania was incorporated into the Russian Empire and belonged to it until World War I, when it was occupied by Germany. In 1918, Lithuania restored independence and adopted the major symbols of statehood, including the national emblem, Vytis, the national tricolor, and the anthem, Tautiška giesmė, by Vincas Kudirka. Later on, the nation elected the head of the state president, adopted the constitution, and they introduced the national currency, litas. In 1940, Soviet occupation of Lithuania destroyed its statehood once again. During the period of Soviet rule, Lithuania lost about a third of its population. Some were exiled to Siberia, others perished in the post-war resistance struggle, still others emigrated to the West. On March 11, 1990, Lithuania declared the restoration of independence. Soviet effort to keep Lithuania in the empire culminated on January 13, 1991, when the entire nation stood up against Soviet tanks and automatic guns. Over a dozen people were killed at the strategic site of TV Tower. Today, Lithuania again is an independent democratic state with its constitution, president, parliament, and national currency. The Republic of Lithuania is full member of the United Nations and the Council of Europe, with diplomatic relations with 82 countries of the world. In its culture, Lithuania seeks to maintain a continuity of tradition. The 20th century art and culture bear a marked imprint of the heritage left by the composer and artist Mikalojus Konstantinas Čiurlionis, well known. At present, the survival of Lithuania's culture is largely due to the dedication of young and gifted artists, actors, and the musicians, since the state subsidies for the arts are insignificant. Only the best and the most talented can hope for state support. And finally, a few words about myself, my family, and our daily life, which is typical of most Lithuanians. I live in 3 rooms apartment in apartment house downtown Vilnius, together with my parents and my brother. Most families in Lithuania have 1 or 2 children and live in 2 or 3 room apartments, and some of them have pets. Many families spend their free time in the open, often in the garden plots. My family, too, has a garden in the suburbs where we get by car. What else? I'm a technical university graduate with a major in economy. At present, I work in promotion and advertising. I speak Lithuanian, Russian, English, and Polish. I've got a lot of friends and enjoy being with them. I hope my story has added to your understanding of Lithuania. Goodbye.
The far eastern part of the Baltic region is populated by Slavic peoples. The Russians, Belarusians, and Ukrainians are closely related to each other and today form 3 large countries. In the south, the Slovaks and the Czechs are also Slavs on the outskirts of the Baltic region. Finally, the Poles also belong to this group. Russia is a very large country indeed, but we will only be concerned with the parts closest to us. One is the area around St. Petersburg, the largest city in the entire region with 5 million inhabitants. The part of Russia within the drainage area of the Baltic Sea has Novgorod and Pskov as important centers. We will call this part Western Russia. Further to the north is Karelia, where the Finno-Ugric Karelians and some other Finno-Ugric people live. However, the Russians constitute almost 90% of the population in Karelia today. Further south, we find the Kaliningrad district. It is an exclave, if you want, isolated from the rest of Russia. Kaliningrad was the East Prussian city of Königsberg up until the Second World War. However, since then it is populated by Russians. The Russian part of the Baltic region is thus made up of these 3 areas: Karelia, the city of St. Petersburg with Western Russia, and the Kaliningrad district. Now we will turn to Karelia.
Good day. I am happy to present you this little film about my native Karelia. This country looks like northwestern pearl of Russia, so its territory is large enough. It's more than 17,000 square kilometers. You see, there are a lot of beautiful lakes, rivers and forests. By the way, forests occupies more than half of the area. At the same time, forests and nature in general are damaged due to atmospheric contamination. The emission of harmful substances only to the atmosphere is almost 200,000 tons per year. I think the national parks help us to solve the problem. You see, the forest preserve Kivach, it lies right in heart of Karelia, being a part of her soul. The preserve got its name from the well-known Kivach waterfall, which height is 11 meters. In fact, national parks and reserves cover about 1% of Karelia. These parks are a sort of an open-air scientific laboratories. The whole year-round extensive complex researches are carried on there to study the varied miracle vegetable and animal kingdom. Waters of Karelia includes 61,000 lakes and more than 26,000 rivers. Unfortunately, a lot of them are polluted by cellulose paper industry. Around 12 paper and cellulose enterprises exist in the region. Lakes Ladoga and Aniga are the largest in Europe. Aniga is about 10 and Ladoga is about 18,000 square kilometers. These lakes have a strategic importance for development of Karelia. The Vala Museum Reserve was organized in 1979 on the naturally beautiful site of historic cultural monuments of the Orthodox monastery Transfiguration of Our Savior. It is situated on island of the Valam archipelago in the northwestern part of Lake Ladoga. The monastery is surrounded by a nature reserve where the local monks have transplanted trees from all over the world during 800 years. Another famous diamond is masterpiece of tiny Kizhi Island, located at the northern end of Aniga Lake. Kizhi is renowned for its open-air museum of architecture, assembled from various areas of the country and restored to form a glimpse of the past. The Transfiguration Church with 22 domes is the ultimate in Russian fairy tale church architecture. You know, Karelia's neighbors are Finland and Norway. First people appeared here approximately 11,000 years ago. They were strong and courage. Today, the population of Karelia is about 800,000, but now there is a tendency to reducing. The density of the population is 4.6 per square kilometers. Almost 50 nationalities live in Karelia, among them Russian are 71%, Karelian 11%, Finnish 3%, Vepsa 0.8%. Official language is Russian. Karelia has her own national symbols, but being a part of Russia, this republic uses Russian symbols and constitution at the moment. There are a lot of creeds and religions here. The main is Christian Orthodox Church. On 29th August 1703, in accordance with the order of Peter I, the blast furnace of the cannon casting works was founded here. In 1777, the settlement was granted the statute of a town, and that's when it got the name Petrozavodsk. Since 1923, Petrozavodsk has been the capital of Karelia. Almost completely destroyed in the years of the World War II, Petrozavodsk was built anew. Today, the capital is a large industrial, scientific and cultural center. Scores of industrial enterprises uphold the Karelian trademark. Karelian branch of Russian Academy of Sciences, 3 higher schools, a lot of colleges function here. There are 4 theaters, some museums and libraries. Numerous newspapers and magazines are printed in the city. Karelia is a wonderful and miracle country, so welcome to be fond of her. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Kirill Sokolov. I am a student of St. Petersburg State University. I wanted to present you a short introduction into geography, economic, political and cultural life of St. Petersburg and its region. In the very beginning of the 18th century, in 1703, Tsar Peter the Great grounded St. Petersburg on the shores of delta of the Neva River. Its city is situated in the eastern part of the Gulf of Finland. St. Petersburg was the economic and political center of the Russian part of the Baltic region, the first capital of the Russian Empire up to 1918 and historical rival of Moscow. The new city was developing on the water. Due to this fact, St. Petersburg has ensured the marine might for the Russia, the free access to the West and the worldwide fame for itself. Nowadays, St. Petersburg is the largest urban agglomeration in the Baltic region. It's spread out on the 42 islands of the delta of the Neva River and on the northern and southern sea coasts of the Neva Bay in the most eastern part of the Gulf of Finland. St. Petersburg is experiencing the new change in Russian history. Nearly 5 million of people within the city and more than 9 million of population of the Russian part of the Baltic region inhabit the parts of the old industrial and cultural center, the new districts known as Sleeping Region, and town satellites of St. Petersburg. The city is the second large industrial and transport center, where more than 5% of the Russian industry is concentrated. Its shipbuilding, heavy engineering and electronics, energy equipment and optics, chemical and light industry are well known in the world. The large enterprises monopolies, with a wide net of subsidiaries and branches, determine the character of the industry in the whole region, at least 60% of which are working for the military purposes. It is the part of the industry that suffers more than others from the unemployment and decrease of production during the conversion and the crisis of the economy. St. Petersburg is the unique scientific and educational center, world known as the cradle of aviation and space technology, radio and television, nuclear icebreakers, Soviet nuclear investigations and nuclear bomb. The city attracts the visitors. It often called Northern Venus, and now it is the largest tourist center. The visitors of St. Petersburg are impressed by the richness of the museums, architectural ensembles and monuments. They are surprised by the contrast of the architectural styles. Much of water in the city is not only the natural basis of the historical and economic power of St. Petersburg, but the reason for the many regular and sometimes catastrophic floods as well. The 20 kilometers length dam that has crossed the Gulf of Finland in 1880, but still haven't been built up to the end, must have defended the city. The dam is the said object for the political and economic discussion that till yet have not reached the final decision. The main firm ground of the dam, Kronstadt, is the contemporary and the guard of St. Petersburg. This city with 50,000 population in its forts are proud witnesses of the confirmation of St. Petersburg in the Baltic. The city is located on Kotlin Island, lying 27 kilometers away in the Gulf from St. Petersburg. The ports of this unique city can serve the ships with 100,000 tons displacement. The realization of the project of building the Evan port and the creation of the special economic zone with federal status may lead Kronstadt to the new economic golden age. The development of this project supposes the involvement of the deserted western part of the island and the southern arm of the dam, which is spread out up to the town of Lomonosov, former Oranienbaum. Lomonosov is the western outskirts and one more marine firm ground of St. Petersburg. There is situated not very large but very interesting for the foreign investors port for the cargo and passenger transportations. Lomonosov is the center of tourism, famous for his palaces and parks ensembles of the 18th century. More to the west along the sea coast, there is a young and still developing town satellite, Sosnovy Bor, the symbol of scientific and economic might of the region. It was thought out as the significant part of the realization of the Soviet space programs, and now it has become the most important energy center of the region and the experimental center of the large St. Petersburg scientific institutions. In this town, the St. Petersburg nuclear power station is situated, which is considered, according to the international estimation, one of the most safe stations in Russia. Russians had developed not only Baltic Sea coast during centuries, but also the vast internal area with 1,000 taiga landscapes, hilly relief and numerous lakes, large and small rivers. Novgorod, the capital of the First Russian Republic of the 12th, 15th centuries, that had defended Russian statehood and which had become an important military, political, commercial and religious center of the region. Outposts of Novgorod on the northern border were the old Ladoga, constructed in the 8th, 12th centuries. Subsequently were constructed several other fortresses. Among them are Schlüsselburg, lying in the source of Neva River, not far from the Ladoga Lake, erected in the 14th century, and Ivangorod, built in the 15th century on the banks of Narva River. On the western border, such outposts of the region were Pskov, known from the 10th century, which had become the center of the Pskov's Republic in the 14th, 15th centuries, and Pechora and its Pskovo-Pechorsky monastery, which was one of the center of the defense of Russian state in the 16th, 18th centuries. The Russians had defended themselves from the outside threats and at the same time peacefully coexisted with other small nations, Karels, Finnish people, Lepsis.
At the southeastern coast of the Baltic Sea, the smallest by square region of Russia is situated. The territory of the Kaliningrad region is 15,000 square kilometers. The population is about 900,000 people. After the Great Patriotic War, the Kaliningrad region took 1/3 of the territory of the former Eastern Prussia, and after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, it turned out to be an ex-enclave separated from the nearest Russian regions by the 400 kilometers area of the foreign countries. The nature of the region is rich and varied, and depends on the influence of the Baltic. There are 4,600 rivers and reclamation canals and about 4,000 lakes and ponds in the region. Forests, 40% of which have an artificial origin, are favored for recreation. But there are not enough wood for pulp and paper industry, which is high developed here. That is why it is as the other branches of industry developed on raw materials from other regions. People settled to the territory from other regions of the country were interested, and they are interested in history of the area, and they like their area and try to improve it. 90% of buildings and reclamation systems were destroyed during the World War II. But the Kaliningrad region became to be a very important industrial, transport and agricultural center of Russia. Its industry is specialized in fishing, machine building, pulp and paper industries. There are some ports in Kaliningrad, the trade port with capacity about 5 million tons and the fishing one. One of the projects of increasing the amount of shipment assumes the construction of large complex with freight turnover of 20-30 million tons. But the development of industries raises the ecological problems. Mineral products lying in the boils of the region are also of great value. In 1975, oil extraction began, and it exceeds 1 million tons in a year now. The extraction of amber increased from 340 tons in 1930 by 2 and 5 times. The deposits of salt, brown coal are also found. According to the point of view of specialists of the Baltic Scientific Center, including the Swedish scientists, the alternative for development of industry and transport is creation of the safe, scientific capable productions, resort and recreation industries, agricultural industry. The international collaboration is under development now. For example, the German company Rasbahn have built the Autobahn Kaliningrad to the border. There are Swedish projects to include it into the European network. Swedish and Russian students participated in this project. In August of 1993, the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, signed the agreement to continue the construction of Autobahn up to Elbląg in Poland. Citizens of the Kaliningrad region are in hopes of the creation of the free economic zone Yantar in the region.
The southern part of the Baltic region is characterized by large plains, good agricultural lands, and it is heavily populated. Poland, with its 38 million inhabitants, contributes close to half of the population of the entire drainage area. The German part of the region, that is northern Germany, has 28 million inhabitants. In northern Germany, we will include 6 of the republics, or Bundesländer. Of course, we will also include the 3 large cities of Berlin, Hamburg, and Bremen. Up to October 1990, northern Germany was divided into the German Democratic Republic and the Federal Republic of Germany, the East and the West. And the fusion of the two halves is today a major concern for young people in the area, regardless if they are Westies from the West or Aussies from the East. There are, of course, also border areas where the two peoples mix. Polish Silesia has a mixed German-Polish population, as does the southeast German corner, where there is also the Slavic minority population of the Sorbs. We will now first hear from the Poles and then from the Germans.
Hi, my name is Iza. I would like to invite you to Poland, my Poland, which I know and experience myself. I am a student of one of the biggest Polish universities. I study languages, computers, and techniques of information, hoping that this is the right choice for my future. I have started to talk about my own future, but what lies before me is strictly connected with the country's present situation and with Polish history. To give you a fair chance to get to know me better, I would like to show you my everyday life. Now, we are in the very center of the city. Let's fly up and take a look around. We can see housing estates which surround Poznań. We can even see the block of flats where I live. I live with my parents in one of these housing estates. This is a typical situation because only a few people of my age can afford buying their own flats. This is one of the toughest problems. Now we are high in the sky. The Polish countryside, where 30% of Poles live, is very characteristic. When you look at it from above, its mosaic is surprising. This is because an average Polish farmland is much smaller than in the West. Polish agriculture is private in about 80%. The farmers in Poland complain like the French farmers do, but the Polish farming lags behind in technology. In spite of all this, the rural community with its old culture is alive. Now even young people start to discover the old tradition for themselves. Now we are continuing our flight. We can see a power station. Almost all energy in Poland comes from coal, the most important resource, very troublesome at the same time as a heavy polluter. Big amount of salt dioxide in the air causes acid rains. The technology of 60s causes serious ecological menace for our environment. The plants don't have any proper installations which could protect the environment against pollution. Nobody used to think about it before, but unfortunately the old plants must still exist. The economic calculation and the social reasons go before protection of the environment. Right now, the Polish industry is undergoing transformation. Conflict between trade unions and the governments are closely connected with the process of reforms. We can see Lech Wałęsa visiting one of the biggest state-owned plants, the Cegielski works in Poznań. As the workers say, their products are competitive and of international quality, while their wages are far below Western standards. They are also disappointed with the corruption.
It used to be. First was the law, and then came the articles, paragraphs. Now in the Czech Republic of Poland we have to find out the article and prove the guilt and only then punish.
But it all takes too long, and meanwhile Poland can be sold out.
Yes, it takes too long, I agree. But what did you do to make it shorter?
A whip. That's what's necessary.
What? What did you say?
A whip.
A democratic whip, you mean. I like it.
The present situation, the process of great transformations, follows from our recent history. I have spent most of my life under the communist rule. Such events as the Pope's visit to Poland, the birth of Solidarity in 1980, were the signs of the end of this era. For a long time, religion has helped us survive wars, invasions and partitions of Poland. In our solidarity and religion we could find our common safety. I should mention that about 90% of Poles are Catholics. We also got a feeling that we can change a lot, that we came therefore of changes in the bloc of communistic countries. But these changes around are so fast that sometimes I really feel at a loss. We are afraid of what is new, knowing that solidarity and religion have lost their former meaning for the people. Now the empire fell apart and we have regained freedom. We can see the last troops of the former Red Army leaving Poland after almost 50 years. Paradoxically, both the Russians and Poles have tears in their eyes. It's maybe a sign that the well-known hatred between these two nations has also been mixed with love. What was in the beginning considered to be a miracle caused by the Pope, God and other supernatural powers has become now a political question to solve. Poland needs a new military alliance and is therefore knocking at the door of NATO Pact. No clear answer can be heard.
After 3 years of recession, connected with the change of the system from central planning economy to free market economy, the economic increase started. This year it is expected to be 3%. Purchasing power of about 10% of Poles seems to be equal to average purchasing power of citizens of rich Western countries. This is what statistics say. But it doesn't mean we have started to experience these changes ourselves. Some of us, the people in the street or the unemployed, wouldn't say anything has changed.
When we graduate, every one of us would like to find a good job. I hope it will be possible, in spite of a new kind of fear we have never known before, which appears among my friends. Fear of being unemployed. Right now, the unemployment rate is about 14%. Almost all our political parties promise to fight this problem. After a long time of the Communist Party domination, our political life is in chaos. It is difficult to say which are the leading tendencies. Practically, the free market economy has gained the upper hand, but the lack of political stability and the frequent changes of government make the economic reform more and more difficult. Anyway, according to the ambitious official program, the GNP will be doubled during the coming 10 years. Meanwhile, we have to keep our cultural heritage. Acid rains destroyed old buildings. When I walk in the old market or other old parts of my city, I really admire them. Both the inhabitants and tourists feel much better in these districts of the city than in those which were built after the war. Here you can find the spirit of our culture. For 1,000 years, Poland had been under many different influences. The medieval towns were planned according to German law. During the Renaissance, the representative buildings were designed by Italian architects, for example the town hall in Poznań from 16th century. Interiors of the Gothic cathedral are designed in Byzantine style. The architecture shows that Poland has been the place where the East and the West meet. But only a few monuments have survived the World War. The reconstruction of them cost a lot of efforts. The form of the old town creates proper background for student spectacles. Every spring we have here our student festival, which we call Juvenalia. During this time, students take the municipal power and rule of the city. This festival gives the students the possibility to show themselves. Poznan is known for its many musical activities. The old and young come to the concerts of Chopin, Wieniawski, and also of modern composers. Music is an international language. Let's listen for a while how a popular violinist, Bartek Nizioł, performs a Wieniawski concerto. Trying to bring my Poland near. Poland, which is full of discrepancies. The source of these discrepancies may derive from our culture, also from Polish love of freedom, individual freedom. Maybe that is why it's more difficult for us than for others to reach compromises. But this is just my Poland, which I want to live in, work, and which I really care for.
Welcome to North Germany. In the northern part of Germany, we will include 6 of the federal states or Bundesländer, as well as the 3 free cities, Berlin, Hamburg and Bremen. The landscape is characteristically lowland, and the traditional economic field is agriculture. About 28 million people live here. Bremen and Hamburg are found at the sea. Hamburg has 2 million inhabitants. Its harbor is famous. The traditional economic branches in the city are trade, fishing and shipping industry. River Elbe, which is an important traffic route for Hamburg, flows through North Germany and into the North Sea.
Between World War II and 1989, a part of the river was the border between the Western and Eastern world. It divided Germany into 2 parts, the Federal Republic of Germany and the German Democratic Republic. In 1989, the socialistic government in East Germany was overthrown by the people. The border vanished and Germany became one country again. New bridges were built over the River Elbe to connect the 2 parts. But do these bridges connect only the land or also the people in Germany again? Looking for an answer, students in the eastern and western part of Germany were questioned. The interviewed students grew up in 2 separate nations of Germany with different ideological and social systems. One thing they still had in common was the language. With the reunification, the people on the eastern part had to adapt to the capitalistic system and had to change their way of life from one day to another. For example, they had to deal with new conditions of studies and also with a new economic situation which forced many people into unemployment. In the GDR, jobs were guaranteed for everybody by the state.
I'm Silke. I come from Wedel, which is a small town near Hamburg. And now I live in Lüneburg, in this apartment, together with my boyfriend. I wanted to stay in the northern part of Germany because I like being close to the North Sea and to the Baltic Sea, and I like the flat land.
Lüneburg is a small town southeast of Hamburg with about 60,000 inhabitants. In the Middle Ages, Lüneburg became an important town because of the rich salt resources which were exported all over Europe. Nowadays, the city is a tourist attraction because of its historical buildings and its typical North German architecture. Because of the near border to East Germany, Lüneburg's trade was cut off until 1989. Today, the trade flourishes. Greifswald, a city in the northeast of Germany next to the Baltic Sea, has also been a salt and Hanse town. It was founded around the monastery Aldena in the 13th century. In the 1970s, a nuclear power station was built near Greifswald. This turned the agricultural area into an industrial place. Since 1990, a lot of construction work has been done in the old center because many buildings were nearly in ruins. The city is prospering now. Today, more than 60,000 people live here.
I was born here in the north and I grew up in the north, and I like the landscape here, and I have my friends here, my family I have here.
I'm Susanne, I'm 25 years old. That's Antje, she's 24 years old. And that's Anne, she's 24 years old as well. And at the moment we are studying at the University of Greifswald.
In East Germany we don't have these tradition like in West Germany as students to live in private flats. Yeah? You have the chance to get a place in a student accommodation hall, and it's very cheap, and therefore lots or most, I think most of our students choose it.
Now, 3 years after the reunification, are there still differences between the people of East and West Germany?
I think that you can't really tell a so-called Aussie from a so-called Westie anymore. I think they probably they look alike, and they have a lot of similar opinions. At least most of them do.
Germany is as divided as before.
Germany has had one currency for 3 years, but the people in the East earn less money than those in the West. That means the Eastern workers earn just 63% of the Western income. Costs of living, however, are nearly the same in both parts.
I watched the wall being torn down on TV. Everybody was just glad and happy and looking forward to the future of the whole country of Germany.
At the beginning of the change, we had the big imagination of a new GDR. That means, yes, more democratic GDR and with more freedom for the people.
Until 1989, about 3 million people left the GDR on their own risk. Since 1989, the number of people moving to the West increased immensely. In 1990, Chancellor Kohl promised that East Germany will become a blooming county within 3 years. What real effect has the reunification had on the Germans' life?
The reunion didn't really affect me personally because I didn't have any relatives over there.
Now we have the possibility to go abroad to Western countries and to learn more about other people, other peoples. So.
Yeah, right. For instance, it's very important for our job, yes. Because of to become an English teacher, and so we have the chance to practice our English. The effect now is insecurity, high unemployment, and our youth is afraid of the future.
Would you like to have the old socialistic system back?
No, I think you can't say it.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. We made the experience, it doesn't work. And it was necessary to change something, but I think the present result is not the best one.
The people in the western part put different emphasis on the present problems than the people in the eastern part of Germany. What do the people think the future of Germany will be like?
The near future is very difficult, I think, because we have a lot of problems with unemployment. Then we have the problems with some extreme groups like neo-Nazis. But I hope in the further future that the country really will grow together.
I think everyone is more concerned with his or her own problems. The division will become deeper and deeper. I really think so. We still have a wall between the eastern and western part.
A new wall.
It's a wall of the mind. And I'm not very hopeful, actually.
Maybe the next generations will change something, but I think not our generation.
All interviewed students only know their part of Germany. As a person who is familiar with both sides, Dr. Jonas, a university lecturer for German and its didactics in Lüneburg and Greifswald, has been interviewed as well. It seems that everybody in the former GDR has to accept the West German social system. Where do you see difficulties for the East German people?
Ich sehe das Verhältnis gerade auch der ostdeutschen Menschen, wobei man sich vor Verallgemeinerungen mal ein bisschen hüten müsste, aber in der Grundtendenz natürlich.
Of course, one has to be careful with generalization, but I think the people in the East were used to believe the authorities. Now the authorities have changed, but the behavioral pattern is still the same. I also notice an opportunistic adaptability.
Opportunistische Anpassungsfähigkeit. Man möchte westdeutsch sein.
The East Germans want to be West German. They don't want to be identified as East Germans. They deny the life they led during the GDR, which was not only suppressed. I miss stronger self-confidence. The border is more on our heads. Removing this border will be a lasting and difficult task. We can only manage it when the East Germans stick to their roots and if West Germans and East Germans accept each other as partners. We should not come up to a simplification of our common history.
Als Partner akzeptieren müssen und nicht zu einer sehr einseitigen und vereinfachenden Betrachtung unserer gemeinsamen Geschichte kommen.
Finally, forming a nation, Germans, your hope is of no avail, so try to develop yourself to free human beings. That's what you are able to. A free translation of the German poet Friedrich Schiller.
There are many minority groups in the Baltic region, peoples not forming their own countries, if you like. Some have already been mentioned, like the Karelians and the Swords. Others include the Kashubs, the Gypsies, or the Romani, the Tatars, and the Jews. Not to mention the scores of other groups that have arrived more recently into the region through immigration. Among all these, we have chosen to introduce the Jews. Up until this century, the Jews were essentially a Baltic people. Although scattered all over the world, more than 80% for centuries lived in a region in Eastern Europe with Belarus, Western Ukraine, Eastern Poland, and Lithuania as its center. Before and during the Second World War, the majority of this people perished in the Holocaust. Many also escaped to other parts of the world. The fate of the Jewish people is a common trauma to all of us. Prior to World War II, more than 8 million Jews lived in the region. In some cities, the Jews made up more than a third of the population. Although a Jewish minority is still found in the region, today the center is no longer here.
Every country in the Baltic region has a Jewish minority. Mostly Jews live in the big cities, nowhere more than 2 to 3% of the population.
My name is David. I live in Copenhagen, Denmark, and I was born in Stockholm. I come from a Swedish Jewish family with origin and roots in Eastern Europe. My ancestors, they lived in Eastern Europe before the Holocaust, and they fled through the Baltic nations to Sweden. I don't recall the time, but it was in the 1940s sometime.
The southern part of the Baltic region was for many centuries the world's most important Jewish cultural center. As had other peoples, the Jewish people in this area had their own language, religious traditions, their culture and national movements. 100 years ago, 6 to 8 million Jews lived in the area. Since then, many have emigrated to other parts of the world. Millions have been killed while others have assimilated. Today, no more than 500,000 Jews are left in the entire region. But for small differences, they live the same everyday life as their non-Jewish neighbors. Jews primarily came to Poland and Lithuania during the late Middle Ages, invited to settle by the kings. Most came from the West, escaping from persecution and expulsion. They brought with them their everyday language, over the centuries developed into modern Yiddish. The Jews often call Yiddish Mameloschen, Mama's language. They also brought with them their holy language Hebrew, used for studies and worship. They established printing presses, synagogues, and famous centers of higher learning. "200 years ago, Russia conquered most of the Jewish settlement area. Russia's new Jewish inhabitants were confined to live in designated areas in the west of the empire. They were forced to move to small townlets, the shtetl, where they often constituted an 80 to 90% majority. Jews also moved to Jewish quarters in certain cities, such as today's Vilnius, Minsk, Lviv, and Warsaw. In towns, they made up more than 1/3 of the population. Here they often lived isolated and they had little contact with their Christian neighbors. In Germany and Scandinavia, Jews had the opportunity to participate in emancipation. Jewish enlightenment and civil society changed Jewish life. They had their place in society and spoke the national language of their country. Jews became a religious minority and citizens with formal equal rights. This was not so in the Jewish settlements in Poland, the Ukraine, and Belarus. Few became affluent. Most had no regular income. Many lived on charity. There were few possibilities to make a living. The Jews chose what was at hand. They became day laborers, petty traders, cobblers, tailors, or beggars. When the men could not earn an income, the wives went out to earn money. Russia introduced quotas for education and many other limitations. On top of it all, pogroms started to ravage the Jewish settlements. As from 1882, a Jewish mass emigration began. The Baltic Sea became a life-saving waterway. Boats with Jewish immigrants were leaving the harbor several times a week. The shipping lines had agents in the cities of the Jewish settlement area. By 1914, 2 million had left, most of them for America. Many also found refuge in German and Scandinavian cities.
I wouldn't call myself religious, not at all. Maybe Jewish by tradition and by heritage, but not by religion. It's a belonging. You're a part of an ethnic group, a minority generally, unless you're in Israel, of course. And it means for me that I have a special kind of living compared to my environment. That which is not so different when everything comes down to everything.
Today, many Jews no longer live a religious life, but earlier religion used to be of the greatest importance. It was common for Jewish men to study the Talmud and the Torah. Boys started in the religious school at an early age. When others were illiterate, Jews, especially the men, could read and write. Many towns in the main Jewish settlement area had famous Jewish academies. During the years of poverty, a religious mass movement spread rapidly through the shtetl area. Its followers were called Hasidim, the pious. It was led by charismatic leaders, not learned rabbis. Religious feelings and ecstasy became more important than the books. It was a way to get away from poverty and be joyous together. The Hasids met in small prayer houses, not in big synagogues. Hasidism was a way of life that kept the community together and the traditions alive. Until this century, Orthodox Jewish life was an integral part of Jewish identity. Even under the most difficult circumstances, Jews observed the traditions. Even during times of hunger, Jews did not work on Saturday, the Holy Sabbath. It is an important element of Jewish religion and culture to take care of others. The Jewish communities provided social welfare. It was a duty to invite a fellow Jew for a meal on Sabbath Eve, for no Jew should be alone on that day. A poor Talmud student would eat in the house of a Jew who could afford it. That earned him honor. It was more important to learn than to earn. Learning, family life, and social concern are essential to Jewish life. Out of the obligation to help those in need grew social and political activities. Jews took active part in the national liberation movements. Under the pressure of discrimination and with the road to emancipation closed, Jewish youths were receptive to the ideas of equality and freedom. Many were involved in the underground socialist movements of the time. An important Jewish workers' movement was the Workers' Bund in Lithuania and Poland. Like other national movements of the time, it fought for autonomy for the Jewish people. Yiddish was intended to become the Jewish national language. Another movement of the same period was Zionism, advocating Hebrew as the national language. After World War I, the old empires broke up and new borders were drawn. Jews moved out of their dense quarters and got involved in secular cultural life. Films, arts, and the theater flourished. Prominent writers published fiction and scientific studies on Jewish topics. Libraries and cultural institutes mushroomed. The area saw hundreds of Jewish newspapers, journals, and books. Actors and tailors were organized in trade unions and associations. The nightmare of Jewish life was still to come. The core area of Jewish settlement was occupied by Nazi Germany. More than 4 million Jews in the core region were killed in the most horrendous ways. Jews were also brought from other occupied countries to Poland and the Baltic countries and forced into ghettos and concentration camps. They met the same fate. Further to the north, the Baltic Sea once again became a life-saving waterway. Sweden accepted Jewish refugees from Germany as well as nearly the entire Jewish minority of Denmark, but this was an exception. After the war, Jewish life was far from easy in Eastern Europe. Soviet policies were extremely anti-Jewish. In Western Europe, it is anybody's own choice how to express his or her Jewish identity. Jewish history is discussed openly. In the Soviet parts of the region, religious life was suppressed. Jewish national identity was registered in one's identity papers. Jewish institutions were closed. Jewish culture and history were taboo, blank pages in history books and literature, as if they had never existed. To live a Jewish life and to remember was hardly possible. After an anti-Jewish campaign in 1968, thousands of Polish Jews left their country. Under great difficulties, Jews also left the Soviet Union in the 1970s and 80s, mainly for Israel and the United States. Today, immigration is free. However, most countries, except for Israel, have now closed their borders. Many Jews who have survived the atrocities of this century strive today to keep alive or revive some of their age-old traditions. They want to know about their history.
And this is an ongoing argument with my father because he insists on singing songs in a language that we don't speak and don't understand, in Hebrew. And he does this and does that. And it's all these ceremonies. And he doesn't believe in God. And I don't believe in God. But he continues doing these. And he uses the argument that we have a weight upon our shoulders as Jews because we have a heritage. He wants me to be Jewish. So, that we don't lose track of our own religion and of our own belonging.
For the majority of Jews, to be Jewish is much more than a religion. It is also a memory of common history and fate.
The three Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, form a rather homogeneous group. Languages are close enough to allow these peoples to understand each other easily. In many respects, they share a common history. Norway was a part of Denmark up until the 19th century and then formed a federation with Sweden for another 100 years. Their recent history is also very similar, as is reflected in today's patterns of close cooperation. Norway only marginally contributes to the drainage area of the Baltic Sea, while Sweden is located in its center. Sweden, with its very elongated shape and surface-wise the largest country in the region, bridges south and north, from the plains in the south, similar to Denmark, to the large mountains in the north. Now we will introduce first Denmark and then Sweden.
There is a Denmark in the world, Denmark. There is a Denmark in Denmark, Fyn. The essence of the country, the essence of the world. A billowing sea-green dew, appropriately surrounding the center of the world. Bathe in the breeze and the changing weather, and the admiring gazes of all, and most beautiful of all, our modesty. Even though we know we are the salt of the earth, we don't tell anyone.
Around 5 million people live in Denmark on 44,000 square kilometers. Every household consists of 2 1/4 people. Every year we only increase our population by 5,000, since 65,000 are born and 60,000 die. We can control a lot of things in Denmark, but not the weather. Denmark is a flat country and consists of a peninsula and 406 islands. With our coastline of 7,300 kilometers, water naturally plays an important role in our way of thinking. No matter where you are in the country, it will never take you more than half an hour to reach the sea by car. Since we are self-sufficient with most of our food products and can even export some, we feel like an agricultural and fishing country. But actually only 6% of the population work in these areas. One of the reasons we are so concerned with farming and fishing could be the fact that Denmark was urbanized relatively late. We still have only one city with more than 1 million inhabitants. One-third of the Danish population is employed in the public sector, with 20% working in industry. The third largest branch is unemployment. Today, more than 11% are unemployed. We have no natural resources in our country, so to compensate, we have to use our brains. The level of education is high, and both young and old go to school to get a better education. Hvad læser du?
Jeg går på universitetet og læser statskundskab, og det har jeg gjort i 5 år.
Hvad med dig?
Jeg læser dansk, og det har jeg gjort i 3 år.
Maybe you could hear that our language shows huge differences in pronunciation. Many people still use their dialect regardless of which social class they belong to. And with a little effort, everybody can understand each other. That's the way it is with the bicycle too. With a little effort, everybody in Denmark can ride a bicycle, and lots of people do. Back to the Danish kingdom. Denmark used to be a giant kingdom with numerous colonies. Large parts of the Baltic area used to belong to Denmark. We had colonies in the West Indies, and the border between Denmark and Germany used to run much further to the south than it does today. By the way, did you know that the Danish flag fell down from heaven in Estonia in 1219? This happened on June the 5th, Valdemars Day. But it's been a long time since Denmark belonged to the great nations. After Sweden took Scania, Halland and Blekinge, Norway declared its independence, and we lost the border war with Germany. And after we sold the islands in the West Indies to the Americans, Iceland declared its independence in 1944, and the Faroe Islands and Greenland were given home rule. Well, we turned into the little country we are today, with a very homogeneous population. Only 3% of the population are foreigners, and many of them come from the other Scandinavian countries. Incidentally, one of the foreigners in Denmark is Prince Henrik, imported from France to be the husband of the Danish Queen. The Queen is still the monarch for both the Faroe Islands and Greenland, even though both now have home rule. I'm going to speak to a representative of one of the foreign groups that visit Denmark the most, the Swedes. Hvad synes I om Danmark?
Vad vi tycker om Danmark? Det är trevligt, trevliga människor, man blir väl mottagen. Vacker natur.
God mat, god öl.
When we talk about our long democratic tradition in Denmark, we mean the time from the fall of absolutism in 1849 and up to today. Back then it wasn't really democracy as we know it today, but democracy for the few. The nobility had been taken down a few notches, and as long as you were a man with an income of Danish descent and over 30 years old, then you could vote. It took 65 years for the Danish women to get the right to vote. The founder of the idea of real people's democracy was Grundtvig. NFS Grundtvig has meant more for Danish society than both Søren Kierkegaard and Hans Christian Andersen taken together. It was Grundtvig who argued that the right to vote should be personal and not by who was important. He insisted that the constitution had to be written in plain language, and he believed in the spoken word instead of the written word. He was the one who founded the first Danish folk high school, where farmer boys and girls could come and be trained and educated in their Danish cultural heritage. There are still many folk high schools round about in the country, where young and old can come and learn something new. Another major trend in Denmark is the social democratic model for society. We have mostly had social democratic governments during the past 70 years. The Social Democratic Party designed the kind of socialism Denmark is founded on. Now the Social Democrats are back in power again, but they are not alone. After we joined the European Community in 1972, we don't decide on everything ourselves, and many Danes are worried about how much Brussels will have a say in things in the future. All the way back to the ratification of the Constitution, everybody has had the right to say what he thinks. As long as you don't insult anyone, in principle everyone has a voice. This rubs off on the upbringing of children and teenagers. They are raised to participate in the public debate, to be free and independent, but responsible at the same time. And this means that many young people leave home at an early age. But not everybody feels they can be heard in Denmark today. A number of young people have banded together in a movement they call the BZ movement. They express their frustrations and have been involved in violent confrontations with the police. One of the quieter ways to protest is suicide. Every fourth death among young people is due to suicide. But how is democracy getting along today in Denmark? I'm going to ask this man about it. What is Danish democracy?
Normally the Danes are rather proud of the democratic tradition. Without the hesitation, they rank Denmark as the #1 society in this respect. And one reason, of course, is the size of the population. With only 5 million inhabitants, the power distance between the politicians and the populations is rather small.
How is democracy doing today?
Well, I think that lately two things has made the democratic scene a little less idyllic. In the first place, the political scene has been enormously complicated by the appearance of a great number of political parties. And in the second place, the integration of Denmark in the EEC has made politics much more of a technical matter, and this has widened the gap and weakened the trust relations between the politicians and the population.
It isn't just the BZs that have a problem finding meaning and identity in their lives. Even though 92% of the population belongs to the Protestant state church, not many of them use the church on daily basis. The churches are used mostly for baptisms, weddings and funerals, and some people look to other religions. We have a free church law that gives everyone the right to establish a free congregation. Everybody is also allowed to found their own schools, even though almost all children attend the Danish public schools. Or you can start your own kindergarten. Children in Denmark attend nursery schools and kindergartens at an early age. There are no mothers to take care of them. Both mothers and grandmothers are working. Even the Queen had to have her children taken care of by other people. She has a lot of work to do. She is extremely busy. She designs Christmas seals and costumes. She has translated Simone de Beauvoir's All Humans Are Mortal into Danish together with her husband, Prince Henrik. She has made the costumes for the TV version of Hans Christian Andersen's The Shepherdess and the Chimney Sweep, and for the ballet, a popular folk tale, which was performed here at the Royal Theatre. Even though there are a lot of Danes who go to the theatre, most of them prefer the coziness of home or to watch football. This is how we dress for the national football games. We are known throughout the world as the friendly football fans who drink beer and sing happy songs. We call ourselves hooligans, which means the peaceful ones. And don't forget, we won the European Championship in 1992. There are some people who aren't crazy about football, of course. How do they pass their time? Well, some of them are artists. A lot of people who receive economic support from the state use their time to produce excellent and extremely creative art. Just look how busy she is. I'm going to ask him about art. How is the situation for art and artists in Denmark?
Well, during the last 10 years, there's been a boom in the cultural field in Denmark. And it's estimated that about 100 to 200,000 people are actively engaged in the arts and culture. Most of this expansion has come within the last 10 years within the fields of video, film, performing arts and visual arts. But on an international scale, on a European scale, the possibilities for producing art and presenting art are very good in Denmark. Most local authorities and also the state has increased funding for the arts during the last 10 years to such an extent that there are very good possibilities in institutions like the one you're in at the moment to present independent and produce independent art.
Danish art is also poetry, so I will end where I started with the Danes' view of themselves. And most beautiful of all, our modesty. Even though we know we are the salt of the earth, we don't tell anyone.
Hello and welcome to Sweden. My name is Ulrika. I was born and grew up here in Uppsala, where I now study history at the oldest university in Sweden, founded in 1477. Behind me now, you see Uppsala's castle and cathedral. This is the largest cathedral in Northern Europe, and also the seat of the Archbishop. Sweden is traditionally a Protestant country, and practically the whole Swedish population belong to the Lutheran State Church. But nowadays, almost no one goes to church at all. I never go, unless it's a special occasion. This isn't the only religion practiced, though. Many of Sweden's immigrants have brought their religions with them, for example, Catholicism and Islam. Now, if I were to tell you about only one of our many kings, it would be Gustav Vasa. Besides building the castle here in Uppsala, he also reorganized the state administration, introduced Protestantism, and confiscated all the church land. But most importantly, he laid the foundations for our modern country by uniting the nation into one state. We still have a royal family, which does a wonderful job representing Sweden. But today, they're without any real power, and actually pretty much like any other Swedish family. At the Olympic Games in 1972, our king, Carl Gustaf, met Sylvia, the daughter of a German businessman. 4 years later, they were married. Their oldest daughter, Victoria, is our queen-to-be. This may say something about the situation for Swedish women. Equality between men and women has come a long way. We work and study under the same conditions. Even boring work at home is shared. Sweden is often referred to as a very small country, but it's actually the 4th largest in Europe. Our population isn't that big, though, a bare 8.6 million, with most of us living in the south, leaving only 20% north of Uppsala. It's very beautiful in the north, but personally, I would never want to live up there. During the winter, temperatures can drop as low as 30 degrees below zero, and the days are only 2 to 3 hours long. On the other hand, they're compensated by summers when the sun literally never sets. This is called the midnight sun. Still, I prefer the southern parts. Our capital, Stockholm, is beautiful in the summer, so if you ever come visit, you have to see the archipelago. Besides, here summer temperatures can reach 30 degrees above zero. We Swedes generally see ourselves as an ethnically homogeneous population, but this isn't really true. There have always been different minority groups living among us, mainly Sames and Finns, but others too. For example, the Germans who came with the Hansa. These merchants contributed with a lot more than their trading business. The Christmas tree is just one example. In the 1600s, the Walloons came to Sweden, from what today is Belgium and Holland. These people taught us how to use our large natural resources of water, forest, and iron ore. This industry financed the expensive wars that for a short period made Sweden the great power of the north. Today, there are immigrants living here from all over the world. Many of my friends come from Finland, Spain, France, even Iran and Turkey. Of course, people have left the country too, especially during the late 19th century. Sweden was then a very poor country, with more than 90% of our population working within agriculture. After several years of crop failure and a large baby boom, the pressure became too big for some, who decided to leave. Most of them bought a boat ticket to North America, with dreams of a better life. My grandfather was one of the 1.5 million who left. So even if Sweden seems to be a faraway place, we've always had contact with and been influenced by the rest of the world, mainly Europe, of course. Today, these contacts seem even more important, especially with our application to the European community. Another way of looking at this is the fact that so many young Swedes travel. Practically all my friends have either studied abroad, interrailed, or taken year-long trips around the world. This is me on a trip in Turkey. Many have seen Sweden as the perfect welfare state. Today, the situation has changed, and we have started to look at our country and system with new eyes. Sweden can't afford it any longer. So, while our parents are worrying about how to finance their lives when they get old, my friends and I worry about future jobs. Unemployment has now reached levels we never dreamed of. But still, they're relatively low compared to many other countries. Our taxes, on the other hand, are the highest in the world. If there's one thing we Swedes love, it's nature. Summer arrived the other week, and the whole town went crazy. Everybody was outside having a picnic, bicycling, jogging in the woods, or just laying about in the park. In the late summer and autumn, you will find me and half the rest of the population bent over, head down in the woods. This is the time for picking berries and mushrooms, or hunting moose if you prefer that. Other popular activities are fishing and camping. In the winter, we ski. Downhill, uphill, cross-country, you name it. Or maybe just take a long walk in the winter woods. Now don't get the idea, though, that Sweden is filled with nature freaks always running around in the woods. We do watch TV and other things too. But looking at the rest of the world, our access to nature is unique. It's called common right and gives us the right to be in nature as we please, public or private, water or land. The only condition is that we don't damage anything, litter, or disturb the owners. With this close relation to nature, the environment is automatically very important to us. The accident in Chernobyl is only one example showing this. The whole nation was in uproar, and still today I often hear people talk about rates of becquerel in berries, mushrooms, and wild meat. In large parts of the country, fish and meat have actually had too high rates for eating. Another event was the public referendum in 1980 concerning our nuclear power plants. It's interesting that none of the three voting alternatives wanted to keep nuclear power as an alternative at all. Instead, we decided to phase out all of these plants by the year 2010. This political interest in the environment began to grow in the 1950s. To mention just one result is the spread of wastewater treatment plants in all towns and cities. Today, people go swimming, even fishing, in central Stockholm. So yes, we do have a unique and very special right to nature, but we are also aware of our responsibilities. By now, you've probably understood that we spend as much time outdoors as possible, especially when something extra is happening. A few weeks ago, we celebrated Walpurgis, the welcoming of the spring. All over the country, people light bonfires and sing. But here in Uppsala, this day is something out of the ordinary. If you're a student, the day starts at 8 o'clock with a champagne breakfast. At 10, we go down to the river and watch the annual student boat race. Lunch is always herring and snaps, with lots of singing before we gather in front of the university library. Here, the whole city waits for the headmaster to wave his student cap at 3 o'clock. Then everyone at least tries to run down the hill for some more champagne. Sweden isn't a country of festivals, more the contrary, so this is definitely a feast you can't miss. Of course, we have other traditions and festivities, like Christmas and Easter, but my favorite is Midsummer. Midsummer is celebrated on the longest day of the year in June, when the sun never really sets. This morning, my sister and I get up early and pick wild flowers to make wreaths for our hair. During the day, neighbors, friends, and family gather in the fields to decorate the maypole. In the afternoon, we raise the pole and then sing and dance around it all night long. No excuses are accepted. No one goes to bed on Midsummer's Eve. I hope you've had a nice visit, and who knows, maybe I'll see you somewhere in the midsummer crowd. Hej då!
The United Nations recently made a list of the indigenous peoples of the world. Peoples that have not arrived to their present territory through recent colonization or migration, that retain a degree of traditional living patterns, and that often live in balance with the environment rather than exploiting it. In the Baltic region, only the Sami or the Lapps are among those peoples. The Sami, which is a Finno-Ugric people, is our largest territorial minority. Traditionally, they've been found in a rather well-defined area in the north. This is the area in which their reindeer-based nomadic life is possible. Although a large population of Sami origin today live in the large cities, far away from traditions, including many young people who attend universities, still many fight for the survival of their culture. We will end up our travel among the peoples of the Baltic where we started, up in the north, but now with the Sami.
Saamiaknami. Monen Jussa Ante Marinka Marianne and Mona Sapnas ki oruta pe upmes. Hello students and welcome. This was a short presentation of me in my mother tongue with the Sami language. My name is Marianne Lörstrand and I'm a Sami student from Sweden. The song you just heard was the Sami national song called Sami Soga Laula. It was written by a Sami man called Isak Saba in the beginning of this century. We are the origin people here in the north. We're about 60,000, but we don't have our own land. We live in 4 countries in Norway, Finland, Sweden, and in Russia. The Sami area of settlement is about 1,500 kilometers long and 300 to 400 kilometers wide.
Reindeer herding is now motorized, greatly facilitating the daily chores of the reindeer Sami. Snowmobiles and off-road vehicles have taken over the tasks of the draft reindeer. The herds have grown larger and must be thinned out. Reindeer herders of south and central Norway were extremely hard hit by the Chernobyl disaster. Radioactive fallout contaminated the vulnerable reindeer moss. Thousands of reindeer had to be destroyed. The reindeer herders and farmers were defenseless against an invisible enemy. No one knows how long it will be before the mountain plateaus and reindeer pastures once again are free of contamination. Since the Chernobyl disaster, all reindeer meat is tested in laboratories. The meat must pass stringent controls, and any meat containing more than 6,000 becquerel is rejected. The Sami people have always lived in harmony with nature, reaping its benefits without depleting its resources. But overexploitation and growing pollution give cause for concern in Samiland too. The Sami people themselves have been compelled to reassess how they, with the modern technology available today, should harvest the fruits of nature in the future. The Sami people have never acquired formal rights of ownership to the natural resources, but they are now demanding exclusive rights over the mountain plateaus and lakes in Samiland. Only persons who have time-honored rights to land along the Tana River are permitted to fish for salmon. Every year, between 100,000 and 200,000 kilos of salmon are caught in the Tana. The Sami have always been a deeply religious people. In the last century, the preacher Lars Levi Lestadius traveled throughout Samiland, rallying large numbers of people to the Christian faith. The conversions strengthened the bonds between the oppressed Sami, but also gave rise to puritanical undercurrents in certain circles. From an early stage, the authorities attempted to use language as a means of Norwegianizing Samiland. Sami children were given little or no training in their own native language and had to do their schooling in a language they could not master. The ancient Sami song form, the yoik, was once considered sinful, but was never entirely eradicated. Mari Boine Persson is one of the Sami artists who are not only preserving the yoik, but developing it through the use of modern techniques and rhythms. Due to the tremendous technological advances, traditional handicrafts have to some extent lost their practical significance. Many Sami artists play an invaluable role in keeping traditional crafts alive. Reindeer horn is still frequently used in Sami arts and crafts. Jon Ole Andersson from Karasjok is one of the best-known artists in his field. The Sami culture is most deeply rooted in the villages on the Finnmark plateau. A Sami wedding is one of the highlights of the Easter celebrations in Kautokeino. Easter also provides an opportunity for the Sami to practice the skills mastered by their forefathers, traditions that have lost much of their relevance to the daily chores of reindeer herding since the advent of snowmobiles and other modern technology. In games and competitions, Sami children and youths try their hand at skills which were absolutely essential only a short time ago.
We do have our own flag. As you see, it's blue, red, yellow and green. It was officially accepted by the Sami people in year 1986, so the flag is pretty new for us. We also have our own national day, the 6th February, depending on that in year 1917, the 6th February, we had the first Nordic Sami meeting. The 16th of May 1993 was the historical day for the Sami people in Sweden. That Sunday was the first election for a national Sami organ, now known as the Sami Parliament. In Norway, the first Sami Parliament election was held in September 1989.
Sami artist Mari Boina Persson welcomes King Olaf V and Sami politicians to the inauguration of the first Sami Parliament. But she dedicates her yoik to the 7 Sami persons who went on a hunger strike in 1981 in front of the Norwegian Storting to protest against the injustice of the Norwegian authorities.
Ooh.